There was a man who walked slowly through the invisible rubble of his own life. These were not material ruins, nor were they losses visible to the naked eye. They were the rubble of the soul, the silent cracks that form when, suddenly, everything that once seemed important vanishes. Friends still call, commitments still exist, but inside him everything is silently deactivated. He wakes, but does not awaken. He breathes, but does not live. Nothing makes sense anymore. It is into this dark existential scenario that Viktor Frankl enters like a lit candle into an endless cave, and he does not arrive with easy promises or quick solutions. He arrives with an uncomfortable, powerful, and liberating question. Have you ever thought about your why? For Frankl, suffering is not the end, but the backdrop against which something deeper can emerge: meaning. He saw this not from a comfortable consulting room, but from the cold, inhuman corridors of concentration camps, where death was as common as starvation, and despair hung like a fog. And even there, on the edge of brutality, he realized that those who survived with some lucidity were not the physically strongest, but those who carried within themselves a purpose, a why. The why is that invisible anchor that sustains a human being when the sea of life is rough. It can be an unfinished mission, a child waiting at home, a book yet to be written, a love you want to find again, an idea that still pulsates, wanting to be born into the world. It doesn't have to be grand in the eyes of the world. It just has to be true to you. When nothing makes sense, the first step is not to run away from the void, but to face it with radical honesty. And in that space of silence, ask yourself, what would still draw me to life, even if everything were lost? Maybe you'll discover that your why lies not in what you have, but in what you can still become. Maybe you'll realize that even though the world around you seems chaotic, inside you there's still a seed of something that wants to blossom. Frankl said that human beings are driven not by the desire for pleasure, but by the desire for meaning. And meaning is not something that can be bought, inherited, or earned. It is something that is discovered. Sometimes it is a look exchanged with someone. Other times it is a simple task done with attention and dedication. It could be caring for an animal, compassion for a stranger, or even the firm decision not to give up today. The why is what gets us out of bed when our body says no. It's what pushes us forward when everything seems to be pushing us back. And perhaps that's what we need most when nothing else makes sense, to rediscover our why, even if it's buried under the ashes of discouragement. And so, step by step, meaning begins to whisper again. It does not shout, it does not demand. It simply invites, and this invitation, however subtle it may seem, can be the thread that brings us back to life. There are times in life when suffering does not arrive as a discreet visitor, but as a storm that breaks down doors and invades everything. It does not knock before entering. It does not ask permission. It simply arrives. Sometimes with a diagnosis, other times with a loss, or even with that diffuse, persistent and silent feeling that something essential has been lost, although one does not know exactly what it is. And it is in this scenario, as common as it is intimate, that suffering presents itself as something that seems to have no use, no value, no logic. It hurts, dismantles, confuses. Why is this happening to me? What did I do to deserve this? What is the meaning of all this? These are the questions that arise naturally, almost like reflexes of a body trying to defend itself from something it does not understand. Viktor Frankl, unlike so many voices that want to numb pain with distraction or deny it with ready-made phrases, looked suffering in the eye. He did not deny it, he did not cover it up, he did not reduce it to a stage to be overcome. He acknowledged it. Pain is real, but it can also be revealing. In the Nazi concentration camps, Frankl saw the essence of human suffering taken to its extreme. And there, where everything seemed dehumanizing, he noticed something surprising. Some people were able to give meaning to their own pain, and this made them spiritually invincible. They were not exempt from pain, but the pain, paradoxically, was transformed into a space of depth, into a new relationship with their own existence. Suffering, according to him, can contain a call, not a call to despair, but to transcendence. It can be the occasion when, stripped of everything, the human being finds himself face to face with the essential question, what sense can I make of this? Of course, this is not about forcing false optimism or seeking magical justifications. Frankl's proposal is bolder and more painful. He invites us to bear the question without rushing to the answer. To remain in the darkness with a certain kind of faith that even if I don't see it now, this pain can have a meaning. It is not the pain itself that redeems us. It is our attitude toward it. Bitter, denied, or revolted suffering tends to close in on itself. But suffering that is accepted with courage and dignity, even without an immediate response, can become fertile. It can teach us, open our eyes, and deepen our being. Sometimes it is only after the storm that we realize how much we have grown. Other times, meaning is not found directly but indirectly, in the empathy that arises from those who have suffered, in the care for others, in the solidarity that only those who have gone through the night know. The pain then is transformed. It does not disappear, but it ceases to be useless. Frankl stated, suffering ceases to be suffering the moment it finds meaning. Maybe that meaning is the mission to carry on for someone who is gone. Maybe it is bearing witness to pain and in doing so, helping others to bear theirs. Maybe it is becoming more human, more profound, more attentive, or maybe it is simply not giving up, and in doing so silently affirming, even though I am hurt, I choose to carry on. Because in the end, suffering is not the opposite of life. Sometimes it is the field where life transforms, purifies, and reveals itself more deeply than it would ever be possible without it. There is something deeply unsettling about realizing that you have no control, that the world does not turn as you wish, that time does not stop to wait for your pain, and that no matter how much you wish, beg, or fight, certain things are simply beyond your reach. Loss, death, betrayal, bankruptcy, illness, loneliness, indifference. It is in these moments, when everything seems to slip through your fingers, that despair whispers loudest, you have no choice. But Viktor Frankl, with the authority of someone who has experienced the unthinkable, gives us back something that suffering almost robs us of. The awareness that there is still a choice, always. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. So he wrote, not from the tranquility of an Austrian cabinet, but behind barbed wire fences, weighed down by hunger, pain, and the constant threat of death. It's easy to say that when life is going well, but Frankl wasn't talking about artificial positivity. He was talking about an inner freedom that no one, not even the most cruel oppressor, could take away. Even when you can't change the situation, you can still change the way you approach it. This freedom of action is not a comfortable choice. It is often silent, invisible, and solitary. It does not mean that you will be happy, nor that you will feel immediate relief. But it does mean that you are not at the mercy of everything that happens. There is still a spark of autonomy within you, an indestructible dignity that can choose, even if in tears, not to give in completely to the absurd. Imagine someone in bed with no strength left to walk. Their body no longer responds. Their dreams have been shattered. Their future is uncertain. And yet, this person can decide to face their final days with courage, with tenderness, with dignity. This does not change the disease, but it changes everything. Because now they are not just a victim. They are the author of their own response. And that goes for the ordinary day too. You don't control what other people do, but you can choose not to take revenge. You can choose not to harden yourself. You can choose to keep your humanity intact. Frankl saw men hand over the last piece of bread to another prisoner. He saw gestures of compassion amidst the brutality. Small acts, but they echoed a profound truth. No one can force us to hate. No one can force us to despair. No one can stop us from being true to what is most true within us. This is the ultimate freedom, the freedom to be, even when everything around us tries to disfigure us. So when everything seems meaningless, maybe the question is not, why is this happening to me? But how can I answer this without betraying who I am? Because even if everything falls apart, the way you present yourself to the world, that is still yours. And sometimes this choice is enough to start a silent reconstruction from within. There is a silent anguish, almost imperceptible to others, that arises when you look around and realize that the world is turning. People continue living, smiling, working, building, and you are there, standing still. Not because you want to, but because you can't find a reason to move. Not because you are lazy, but because you have lost connection with your purpose. And in this emptiness, a painful doubt grows. Is there something wrong with me? Everyone seems to know where they are going, only I am lost. This is where Viktor Frankl offers one of his most liberating and also most challenging truths. The meaning of life is not universal. It is not fixed. It is not the same for everyone. What's more, it changes from person to person, from day to day, from moment to moment. This idea at first glance may seem frustrating. After all, it would be easier if there were a single map, a clear route, a ready-made recipe for meaning. It would be comforting if someone could simply say, "Do this, and your life will be worthwhile." But it is not like that. For Frankl, meaning is like a subtle call that only you can hear. It is not given by external authorities, nor by society's expectations, nor by the world's standards of success. It is discovered as if you were digging through a rock in search of something that only shines when seen by your inner light. What gives meaning to my life may have no value in yours, and what sustains me today may no longer make sense tomorrow. Because meaning is not a fixed throne on top of a mountain. It is something alive, in movement, in constant transformation. That's why when you feel that nothing makes sense anymore, perhaps what has happened is not the disappearance of meaning but a change in its form. What once moved you no longer serves you. Like clothes that have become too tight, like a house that no longer shelters you. And that's okay. What matters is realizing that the emptiness that hurts is also the space where something new can be born. That the fact that you don't find meaning in what was once enough for you is not a sign of failure, but of maturity, of evolution. Maybe you don't find your purpose in a diploma, but in the eyes of someone you help. Maybe it's not in success, but in serenity. Maybe it's not visible to anyone, but it's yours, and therefore enough. Frankl said that we should not ask, what is the meaning of life, but rather realize that we are the ones being questioned by life at every moment. In other words, life is waiting for your answer, and only you can give it. That's why no one can live in your place. No one can discover for you what moves you, what excites you, what makes you want to get out of bed even on dark days. This is a sacred task, intimate, non-transferable, unique. When nothing else makes sense, perhaps it is time to silence the noise of comparisons, external pressures and demands. And then, with courage, look within and ask, what is of value to me, even if the world does not understand? And by asking this question, even without an immediate answer, you have already started on the path back. Because the meaning is not far away nor hidden. It is just waiting to be rediscovered by you in your own way. We live in an age that invites us, almost forces us, to look within. Modern mantras whisper, "Find everything within yourself." Self-help books, social media, marketing slogans, they all seem to repeat this seductive idea that the meaning of life is something that is already within you, just waiting to be discovered, like a treasure hidden in the basement of the soul. But what if you look inside and find nothing? No light, no answer, no call, just silence, a weariness, an echo of emptiness, a labyrinth without a center. This is where Viktor Frankl breaks with this widespread paradigm. He proposes something that may sound counterintuitive, perhaps even uncomfortable for the contemporary ego, but profoundly liberating. The meaning of life is not inside you. It is outside. This does not mean that you are empty or worthless. Quite the contrary. It means that you are a being in relation, who finds fulfillment not through endless introspection, but through encounters with the world. Meaning is revealed in the relationships you build, the responsibilities you take on, the tasks life presents you with, the commitments you have accepted, often without even asking for them. Frankl said that life is constantly challenging us. It doesn't just please us, it challenges us. It asks us, what are you going to do with it? How will you respond to this pain, this loss, this injustice? And the answer to these questions is not hidden in an inner insight, but in the act of leaving oneself, of turning to the other, to work, to the present moment. When nothing makes sense anymore, it's common to sink into dark introspection, trying to dig within ourselves for some spark of clarity. But Frankl proposes a counter-movement, to lift our eyes, to look outward. Ask yourself, who needs me now? What task calls me even if I don't feel ready? What is life asking of me at this very moment that only I can answer? Meaning is not an internal emotion, but an external responsibility. It arises when you commit to something that is beyond yourself, whether it is a person, a cause, a value, a work, even a memory that needs to be honored. And in doing so, something changes. Pain is no longer just suffering. Time is no longer just waiting. Life is no longer just yours. It becomes an offering, an encounter, a mission. Frankl saw men in extreme poverty find meaning in tasks as simple as consoling a cellmate or writing words on a dirty piece of paper, because in that gesture lay the answer to the question life was asking them at that moment. So when the world seems aimless and the emptiness pulls you inward, remember this: maybe you're looking in the wrong place. What will save you will not be a brilliant inner revelation, but a concrete choice made out there, in the real world, in everyday life, in the other. Because meaning is not hidden within you, it is waiting for you out there in life. And life keeps asking every day, what will be your answer now? There is a type of pain that doesn't scream, but weighs heavily. That doesn't paralyze you completely, but day after day, it saps away your will to continue. It's the pain of disconnection, of looking around and realizing that everything seems too small, too repetitive, too irrelevant. That your life doesn't change at all, doesn't move you, doesn't reach anything beyond your own navel. And little by little, that dreaded question arises. What's the point of all this? Viktor Frankl, perhaps more than any other thinker of the 20th century, understood this anguish as a legitimate existential cry. For him, the need for meaning is not a whim, it is a vital urgency. And one of the most powerful paths to rediscovering this meaning, according to him, is precisely this: get involved with something bigger than yourself. But what does this mean exactly? It means leaving the closed cycle of your own pain, your own desires, your own thoughts, and opening yourself up to a cause, a mission, a dedication that goes beyond the boundaries of your ego. It's not about denying your needs nor running away from your feelings, but about realizing that you weren't made to live only around yourself. Frankl called this self-transcendence, the ability of human beings to overcome themselves, to step outside themselves, to direct their existence towards something or someone beyond themselves. And it is in this gesture of overcoming that meaning blossoms. You can find it in a work you create, in a child you educate, in a community you serve, in a person you love, in a pain that transforms, in a faith that sustains, or even in a memory that you decide to honor with your attitude. The important thing is not the size of the something bigger. It doesn't have to be a revolution. Sometimes that something is tending a garden, writing a letter, accompanying someone in solitude, fighting for justice, transmitting a value, doing good silently and persistently. And why does this matter so much? Because when you connect with something bigger than yourself, your pain doesn't disappear, it gains context. You stop being just a vessel of suffering and become an instrument of transformation. You stop asking just, what does the world have to offer me? And start asking, what can I offer the world even if I am hurt? That's what keeps pain from turning into despair. Knowing that, even so, I can still serve. I can still be a bridge. I can still be a source. And sometimes, knowing that someone depends on you, that a cause counts on you, that a life will be touched by yours, that's enough to keep going. Not out of obligation, but out of love. Frankl saw this happen at the most unlikely times. In the concentration camps, many of those who resisted were not the physically strongest. They were the ones who had something to live for, something to suffer for, something to keep going. That something greater might be a child waiting outside, an unfinished book, a deep ideal, a promise made in the heart. This commitment to something beyond oneself does not numb the pain, but redeems it. It gives existence a direction that does not depend on the mood of the day, nor on the circumstances, nor on what the world applauds. So if everything seems meaningless, maybe the way out is not to dig deeper within yourself, but to look up and ask, what outside of me deserves my effort, my dedication, my loyalty? The answer to this question may not come immediately, but the search is in itself a new beginning. Because when we get involved with something bigger than ourselves, we become bigger too. Pain, when it arrives, doesn't ask permission. It doesn't warn. It doesn't negotiate. Sometimes it comes suddenly, like a storm that breaks everything. Other times, it settles in slowly, like a fog that gradually covers the horizon, until you realize you can no longer see anything. And in these moments, when the body weakens, the heart bleeds, or the soul empties, a question arises, raw, cutting. Why suffer so much? Why continue to endure what seems unbearable? The temptation to give up, to let go of everything, to hide from the world or from yourself, is understandable. Anyone who has ever felt real pain knows suffering is a primitive, blind force that can swallow everything. But this is precisely where Viktor Frankl becomes a beacon. He does not minimize pain. He does not romanticize it. He experienced it firsthand in the concentration camps where all seemed lost. But even there he saw something that many did not. Pain, when linked to a purpose, can be endured. This idea is not easy consolation. It is a quiet revolution, because it changes the question from, how do I escape this, to, what can I mean by this? Frankl observed that suffering, however terrible, did not destroy everyone. Some succumbed, others hardened. But there were those who bore the pain with a quiet, almost mysterious dignity. What sustained them? It was not physical strength. It was not empty optimism. It was meaning. It was the purpose. And this purpose can take many forms. It could be a commitment to someone you love. It could be a decision to set an example. It could be a desire to turn your experience into a helping hand for others. It could be faith in something that transcends pain. Frankl says that many prisoners survived because of a child waiting for them, or because of a manuscript they wanted to rewrite, or because of a silent promise, I will not let this pain disfigure me. When suffering becomes part of something bigger, when it is integrated into a story, a project, a fidelity, it does not disappear, but it transforms. It ceases to be punishment and becomes an offering, a path, a testimony, and even outside the extremes of war, this is also true. The mother who gives up comfort to care for a sick child, the man who braves chemotherapy with determination because he wants to be alive to see his grandson grow up. The woman who mourns with love because she knows that continuing to live is a way of honoring the one who is gone. Purposeful pain does not spare us from suffering, but it keeps us from being crushed by it. It allows us to walk through the dark night with a thread of light in our hands. Frankl said, "He who has a why can face any how." So if today your pain seems meaningless, if all you feel is heaviness, loss, exhaustion, maybe it's not time to try to escape. Maybe it's time to ask, honestly and courageously, what can this be used for? What can this become? Who can this touch? And maybe from then on, the pain will not be cured, but you will find a reason to keep walking with it. And that, sometimes, is all you need to not give up. Suffering is an inevitable reality of human existence. No one goes through life unscathed. Sooner or later, something breaks us. A loss, a rejection, a diagnosis, a failure, a silence that drags on. And in the face of this, a common but dangerous confusion arises. The idea that suffering is in itself noble, that the more one suffers, the more dignity one gains. Viktor Frankl, who saw suffering in its most brutal and absurd form, never romanticized pain. He knew, perhaps as few others do, that there is suffering that makes no sense at all. Suffering that results from cruelty, neglect, malice, ignorance, suffering that could and should have been avoided. And that is why Frankl wisely warns us, not all suffering is necessary. There is no need to wallow in pain to prove your own worth. There is no need to persist in abusive relationships, in jobs that nullify you, in paths that make you sick, just because that's just how life is. That is not courage. Often it is resignation in disguise. There are pains that we must avoid. There are wounds that do not need to be opened. There are battles that are not worth the soul they consume. But even so, even when suffering inevitably comes upon us, the death of a loved one, an unexpected tragedy, a loss beyond our control, Frankl invites us to see something more. He doesn't invite us to suffer passively. He invites us to give meaning to what has happened to us. The question changes from why me to now what do I do with it? Because if suffering cannot be avoided, it can still be transformed. It can become a gesture of empathy, a story told, a bridge between two solitudes, a silent force that sustains others. Think of a scar. It's not pretty, but it's proof of healing. And often it's what makes a story unforgettable. Likewise, suffering, when embraced with courage and redirected with awareness, can become a turning point. It can show us what really matters. It can tear away the surface of life and reveal what was essential, but was buried in the noise. Frankl said that human beings are not free to avoid pain, but they are free to decide how they will face it. This is the ultimate freedom, which no one can take away. The freedom to choose one's attitude towards inevitable suffering. And by making that choice, you don't eliminate the pain, you illuminate it. You say to the world and to yourself, "It hit me, it hurt me, but it didn't define me. And even if it wasn't necessary, I will make sense of what happened to me." This is a force that transcends, that redeems, that liberates, because even if the pain wasn't fair, you can decide what it will mean from now on. Few things challenge the human spirit as much as the idea of the end of a story, the end of a cycle, the end of a life. In the face of death, whether our own or that of someone we love, all the constructions of reason seem fragile. The ground disappears, time freezes, questions scream, and the silence becomes deafening. Viktor Frankl, who lost his father, mother, wife, and brother in the Nazi concentration camps, faced this abyss head-on. And contrary to what one might expect, he did not fall into nihilism or give in to despair. On the contrary, he stated clearly and tenderly that even the end can contain meaning. Yes, even in mourning, even in farewell, even at the final limit of what we can bear, life can still challenge us. Frankl reminds us of something fundamental. Finitude does not invalidate existence. In fact, it is precisely because we have an end that life acquires value. If time were infinite, nothing would be urgent, no choice would be definitive, no loss would hurt, no moment would be irreplaceable. But death exists, and so each moment is unique, each presence precious, each bond sacred. In mourning, there is a pain that seems to have no end, an emptiness that digs into the chest, an absence that screams in every daily gesture. But even this pain, according to Frankl, can contain seeds of meaning, not because the loss was good, but because you can choose what you will do with it. You can honor that person. You can carry something of them within you. It can become a legacy. You can transform absence into symbolic presence, pain into memory, memory into mission. How many people, after a loss, have discovered a vocation? How many pains have become a source of empathy, consolation, courage? How many mothers who have lost children have begun to fight for other mothers? How many men and women, after losing their health, have found a spirituality that was previously dormant? It's cruel, it's true, but it's also mysterious. The limit reveals us. When everything seems to end, something begins. When everything seems to fall apart, something essential remains. When you have nowhere left to stand, sometimes you learn to fly, even if it's from within. Frankl did not speak of death as a negation of life, but as a part of it, and what is more, as a part that can illuminate everything else. The question he invites us to ask is not, why does life end? But wait, what can I do with the time I still have? What is worth leaving as a trail, as a mark, as a presence? And in doing so, even the end bows before meaning. Because dying can be a gesture of love. Fighting until the end can be a silent legacy. Accepting loss with dignity can be a more powerful lesson than any class. When nothing else seems possible, when all is dark, meaning can still whisper, perhaps not with words, but with presence, with choice, with faith, with surrender. And then even death ceases to be just the end. It becomes a passage, a response, a testimony, and you, even though you are injured, remain alive with purpose. There is a silent illusion that looms over our time, the idea that to be truly free, we must be in control, master destiny, predict the future, manage every variable, surpass every limit, overcome every obstacle, shape the world in our own image. We often live as if existence were a project that needs to be managed efficiently and successfully, as if happiness were the end product of a well-solved equation. But then, life happens. An illness arrives. Someone leaves. A job ends. Anxiety sets in. Certainty disappears. And then everything that seemed solid, the planning, the control, the mastery, collapses. What do you do when you can no longer control it? When you can't prevent it, fix it, or predict it? This is where Viktor Frankl offers us a disarming but liberating answer. Life is not something to be mastered. It is something to be responded to. This simple inversion changes everything. It shifts the axis of our existence from imposition to listening, from ego to encounter, from control to commitment. Frankl said that life is like a question asked to each of us, and that the meaning is not in controlling what happens to us, but in how we respond to what happens to us. This means that we are not masters of existence. We are its interlocutors. Life speaks to us, life proposes to us, life challenges us. And our freedom does not lie in choosing what will happen to us, because often we cannot choose, but in choosing our attitude toward whatever comes. That is why even in the worst conditions, like a concentration camp, there is still freedom. Because you can still decide who to be in the face of suffering. You can still choose not to hate. You can still reach out. You can still maintain your dignity. You can still say, I don't control what hurts me, but I choose what I will become. This is the essence of human existence according to Frankl. Responsibility. Not in the heavy sense of guilt, but in the noble sense of response. Living is being willing to give a personal, ethical, and meaningful response at every moment. Sometimes that response will be silence, other times it will be resistance, other times it will be surrender, other times it will be a new beginning. But what matters is that this answer is yours, authentic, faithful, free, because that is how life gains meaning, not when you dominate it, but when you listen to it. When you say yes, even without understanding everything. When you continue, even without controlling anything. When you answer, with courage, the silent question that each new day brings. And then, even when nothing makes sense at first, you discover that the very way you live is already a response to the meaning you seek. You don't need to have everything figured out to be on the right path. You just need to be committed to responding with truth, with dedication, with purpose. Because life, as Frankl taught us, doesn't expect perfect answers. It just expects you not to give up on answering.